So if you're ever curious about how you take a computer model of something and this is just a digital representation of a part. In fact, this is only half of the actual part because the full part looks like this. In fact, one of these is a mirror of the other. And I'm wanting to just produce one of these, which is the mirror image. So I'm going to bring it all the way back to where we were just at. I'm only going to machine the first half of this because my milling machine doesn't have the capability of doing the full span of this in one shot. So I'll set up the machining strategy just to do the first half. And well, what we do is we initially just define, well, this is what the stock material looks like. It's this yellow bounding box that you see. It's basically, I'm going to cut a piece of wood that looks like that. In fact, it's actually going to be the full length, but because we're only machining this first half, I'm going to bound my machining strategy to just what you see here in basically the first half. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to face it off, all right? And this shows you the toolpath that a really, really big machining head is going to use. And here you go, there's a representation of that. So one of my first things I'm going to do is I'm going to run this thing over the top of that just to carve this down to the height that the final part needs to be. And that's all good and well. Well, the next thing they need to do is once I've got that block carved down, you can see this like this bounding box here. This is kind of technically about the size of the piece of wood I'm going to use. So the next thing they need to do is carve out from the edges of the piece of wood to at least get close to the outer shape of this piece. So what you see here, actually, these blue lines are the path that the milling head is going to use to cut that piece out. So what we actually would see is, okay, well, here's that block of wood, and we're gonna let it go. And wow, oops, let me do that one more time. We'll do a stock simulation, and we just go play, and here we go. You start to see it cut it out. We can kind of speed it up a little bit, you know, because we don't be sitting here forever, but it's going down at 2.5 millimeters per step. And you can see how it starts to create the outline of the part, right? Good enough. I'll make it go real fast. Boom, there you go. I'm leaving just a little bit of excess material at the bottom. Anything, right? So then the next thing that we're going to do is what's called a Scallop Pass. And this is going to do the final shaping of that piece of wood into this final part shape that we want. And you can see, you know, this is a 1 millimeter gradient that it goes down through each one of these passes so that we can create that shape. And then what I'll end up doing is just taking my sanding block, and I'll sand out the little kind of cusps, because what we're going to be using here is a rounded bit where the tip of it looks like the half of a sphere. So when we see what that looks like through the stock simulation, you can see here that, you know, the bit has this rounded sphere. It's 3/8 of an inch in diameter, and we'll let this thing just play through, and you can see how it just starts carving everything out. So what's really cool about this software is that you can actually see what the software is going to make the machine do before you actually load it all together and hope that it does what you want it to do. So we can let this thing go even faster and just speed it all the way up as fast as we can possibly go. There it is, just carving the whole thing out. But what we can do is, instead of just looking at what that particular toolpath is going to do, let's just look at the entire job from facing all the way to the final machining process for this top side of the part. So we're going to do what's called a stock simulation, which is we're going to machine or simulate what the whole processes of everything is going to look like, starting from the very beginning. So, whoops, do that one more time. Stock simulation. I'm going to slow it down a little bit, and here we go. So there's the first pass. Here is the outer profile pass. So it's not cutting like inward to the part. It's literally just cutting all the material away from the outer shape of this piece of wood first. And we can speed it up a little bit. Now here comes the actual profiling, where it starts to carve out like the real specific shape of the piece. This is all computer generated. You know, I tell it what I want it to do, and then it mathematically derives all these passes to be able to clear all the material away to produce the shape of the part that you see in the drawing. So I'll speed this up a little bit more. It's showing some of these simulation events, saying that, you know, there's some collision here between the part and the tooling. That's just because of, it's just trying to indicate to me that, well, you know, the depth of the cut and the cutting face of the tool, it might be clashing and not actually be able to cut the material, but I know what this actual tool looks like. So I'm going to ignore that for now. But we're going to continue to watch this thing just eat away from that block until we have a shape that looks like what I actually drew in the first place. It's kind of cool. You know, even if you look really closely, you can see the little steps here all the way down the face of the part. You just let it keep running here. It's showing that the total machine time to do this is going to be an hour and 53 minutes. But this is actually probably about half the speed, because the cutting rate that I'm currently using for the part is about half of what it can actually do, because I'm going to be carving this out of wood. But here we go. This is the final result of all those machining steps to produce this part. And, well, with just a little bit of sanding here, these little tiny ridges and whatnot, I can sand all of that stuff out. So this will make a really nice piece of tooling. And again, we can just go back to, that's what the actual part looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and post-process this, which means that it's going to produce the programming code that I'm going to save onto a little memory stick and take over to my CNC vertical milling machine. And I'm going to load a piece of cedar in and carve out what you see here. And I'll get back to you on that. Ciao.